Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Resiliency Redefined. Today, we're diving into this idea about unlocks. I recently had this experience where someone had participated in one of my training sessions. And afterwards, she came up to me and said, Robyne, this moment was so critical for me. It unlocked something that I've been trying to unlock for years, and I didn't even realize that this was locked. So I just got so fascinated talking to this woman about the fact that this one piece of information, for whatever reason, she heard it at just the exact time she needed to hear it. And again, it just unlocked this perspective. So I wanted to take a deeper dive with you today to talk a wee bit about unlocks and what are unlocks and how, oh my goodness, can we get more of them in our everyday, especially if we need them. So, to set us up for this from a psychological perspective, it reminded me of the work that we talked about and I shared with my students around these ideas about schemas. Okay, so let's take a deep dive into schemas from the perspective of leading into this place where we can develop or be able to cultivate unlocks. So again, we can start to feel better. We can move forward. We can level up, skill up, whatever that blockage is. This is how we're going to move forward. And again, my friends, this is not woo-woo. It is science. There are actually ways that we can unlock different ways of knowing, different perspectives, different insights. And all of this does come back to these ideas to start us off around schemas. So when I was teaching at the university, one of my favorite lessons that I would share with my students, and I would teach this in social psych, I would teach it in intro psych, and even child and family psych, because to me, it was so helpful if we didn't have a big background in neuroscience to welcome people to this idea of how our brain learns using this example. So once again, the examples I love to provide are examples from the wild, which is my life with children. And I remember when Hunter was just a little one, he was obviously having these massive learning explosions like babies do and toddlers do, right? They're in this major season of learning. And I recall having this moment where he was sitting in his high chair, and all of a sudden, at the time we had this little cat named Abigail, and Abby jumped up onto his like food tray, right on that little platform in front of him. And Hunter's eyeballs literally like looked so big. He just looked at this little creature and he looked at me and he was looking at the cat and me and the cat. And I'm like, oh, teachable moment. So I picked up Abigail and I'm like, Hunter, this is a cat. And I'm like, cat. I pronounced how you say it. I said, look, she's got little ears and she's got whiskers and, she's got fur, she's got paws, she's got this little tail. If you squeeze her, she kind of squeaks. And I started to give him the pieces of information that are those building blocks for what the representation was of a cat. So I gave him all the pieces and said the word multiple times to say, this is a cat. So moving along a wee while later, I remember at the time we had two labs and Rundle walks by and Hunter kind of looked over and he started to like cat. And I was like, oh dear, no, that's a dog. And so pulled Rundle up on my lap again, this big boy. I pulled my big black lab up on my lap and I said to Hunter, I'm like, no, this is a dog. I understand why you wanted to use the word cat, but this is a dog because yes, this has ears and a tail, but he's bigger and look at his paws and I started to like show Hunter the parts of Rundle that were different than Abby and I said this is a dog. And so again, pronouncing dog, telling all the pieces, and then what is happening in his brain is that he already has this essentially this pathway Okay, he has this, you think about neuroplasticity, he has this pathway that says, okay, cat. And then what happens is you have to have your information either fit in or not fit in. And if it fits in, there's confirmation. Okay, this is a cat. But if there's something different, what happens is the brain will actually branch off. And now we're going to have a new connection that's now to the word dog. But what's so interesting, again, from a neuro perspective, to be able for Hunter to be able to identify a dog because of how his pathway was developed, it goes to cat and then there's exclusionary criteria. So now it's basically going to make a turn. It's going to go to activate the information that he has in his mental lexicon that is now, this is a dog. Okay, I hope you're following with me. So information gets put in a place, and then if it agrees, if that's true, it's like, yes, it reinforces that as a cat. If not, it had to branch out. And now we have a new branch called dog. So a while later, we're, driving out to the lake house. We're going to visit my parents in Buckhorn, and Hunter's in the car seat in the back seat, and he gets so excited. And he's like, dogs, 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 dogs. And I'm looking everywhere for, like, clearly we're being chased by a pack of wolves because this kid's getting very excited about dogs. And I'm looking everywhere and I can't see a dog, but I do see a whole field of cows. And I thought, okay, teachable moment. Pulled over the SUV, and I remember climbing into the back seat, and I'm like, dude, I kind of get why you think those are big, big dogs, but you know what? Those are cows. And so I said, yes, it has ears and it has a tail and they have udders. I didn't get into protein sources. I didn't do any of that. Like, I literally kept it age appropriate. I'm like, yes, this is a cow. They live in barns. They're outside. We see them in these pens or these areas. So I was giving him new piece of information. And again, let's hold that spot thought for a moment. He goes to cat. Nope, that's not a cat. Dog. Now I just said, nope, that's not a dog. So he gets a new branch that's going to take him over to this new place that's called cow. So this is exactly how schematics work, right? Our brain starts to architect these pathways to be able to understand and hold knowledge. And again, with the goal of being able to recognize and retrieve. Same day, I kid you not, we're driving back now. So we're heading back into the city from the lake house, and Hunter's getting very excited once again. And he's like, cow. And he's like trying really hard, and he's trying to get my attention to point. And I look over, and it was this horse that was at this gate. And I was very tired at this point, and I'm like, close, close, and just kept driving. Now, I can assure you at 21, Hunter can tell the difference between a cow and a horse. But why I use that example with my students is information is building blocks. Either things assimilate or they have to find new categories. And that's how we hold knowledge. That's how we create information. This also ties back into why our relationships with our primary caregivers are so significant in establishing our roots of trust and security, because every other relationship essentially is going to be built off that branch system. So every other relationship is going to activate those other areas of the brain while it is, again, fitting in or making new information. Why all this is so important is when we think about an unlock, often what's happening is that there's a learning explosion, right? There's this kind of idea of this notion that the information wasn't there, but then because we had this new opportunity for it to branch out, it starts to improve. We start to now have a new pathway or a new way of seeing something that perhaps we didn't see before. And when we think about this is why, let's take a simple example. This is why how we talk to ourselves, that inner dialogue, it is so important that we speak to ourselves in a kind way. Because the more something travels along one of those neurological pathways, there's this idea about this like myelin sheathing that happens in terms of where the neuron goes. And that myelin, it creates this like fatty substance that creates this smooth path. The more we have something travel down it. Okay, so think about it as if you have a road, and the more you travel on that road, the smoother it's going to get because there's just that frequency. So that myelin starts to create this, again, we're simplifying this, but this fatty substance, which means it gets those thoughts moving very smoothly. So if you, for example, carry a lot of negative self-talk, that is going to be a pretty slippery, easy to access place for those neurons to go. And if a neuron has an option to travel down a bumpy, not a very well defined path, or that fatty, slippery path, it's going to take that path every single time, which is why learning is bumpy. Learning is meant to be messy because it doesn't have that smooth effect yet, because we haven't traveled along that pathway enough yet. But as we do, we experience mastery and things go very smooth back and forth to the point where we again experience mastery, or we can pretty much occupy what we call autopilot. We can just do things without giving it a lot of attention because the neuron has such a smooth sailing, smooth way to go forward. Okay, all of this kind of idea to say, if the negative talk is the smoother of the path, and the positive talk or the affirmations or the reframes, if we don't visit them with the same frequency, or if not greater frequency, it will always be bumpier. And we have to work that muscle. Okay, we have to work that path. So I'll give you an example. If we always say, I'm really disorganized, I'm such a disorganized person, and that's just your fallback, that's your kind of go-to excuse, that idea is going to become just almost automatic. We're just going to internalize it deeply, literally internalizing it into our brains. Versus if we say, wow, I notice that I need to make sure to be a bit more careful with where I put things. I notice that I'm learning to be more strategic. I notice that I'm working at developing the skill to be more organized. We have to revisit that positive affirmation. Now, I have a bit of a kind of get a little bit cheese when people think, let's take, for example, manifestation, right? And they're like, oh, and it's interesting how people are really in different camps around manifestation. Like on one side, people are like 100%, you just have to wish for it and then be grateful for it and it's going to happen and you don't have to do anything, which I don't think really that's how it works, but I appreciate that some people's school of thought. And then on the other side, there's no such thing. We have to work hard for everything, and that's woo woo, and they don't see the value of understanding that no, we can change our energy. And when we change our energy and we change our thinking, it makes things more possible. It opens the door for more opportunities. So there's some value add to what manifestation could look like. But ultimately, when we think about these concepts, what we're doing is it's a way of creating this energetic flow in our thinking system. And it makes a really big difference on how we see the world, how we feel within the world. So we can put practices in place to make things smoother and more open to us, so to speak. Hello, everyone. My name's Robyne. I'm excited to tell you about the Stress Wisely Virtual Lab Experience. Now, this is a program where people are going to have the opportunity to complete a baseline, figure out where their stress levels are, what areas that they have strengths, what areas do they need more investing. Now, all of this work is based on my book, Stress Wisely, How to Be Well in an Unwell World. And I'm excited to bring research-informed practices into this community so people can get their own blueprint. Not every solution works for everyone, but when we learn how to stack and sort and how to sequence practices, habits, and tools that give people a great return on their investment, they're going to start to feel well again. This is going to prevent burnout. This is going to give people the resources and the tools to know what to do, but also how to do it. So please join me in the first ever Stress Wisely Virtual Lab. We are going to be able to get to the bottom of what it takes for each person to figure out how they can be well. Now, we call it a lab because ultimately this is all a big experiment. We need data to make data-driven decisions to know where people are going to start to do the work to feel better. So please join me for the Stress Wisely Virtual Lab. Lots of information. We saved you a seat. And if you want to radically show up for your team, this is a resource that you don't want to miss. Take good care and we'll see you there. Bye. Now, a question I often get asked is, okay, Robyne, how do we improve this, this myelin sheathing? How do we improve this neuroplasticity? It's the things that you already know. It's the basics. It's learning new skills. It's making sure we're getting enough sleep. It's making sure that we're eating healthy foods for our brain. It's amazing that our brain is so small, but it literally takes up I believe it's like, 40% about of what we eat goes to fuel our brain in our whole bodies. So if you think about the distribution of energy from our food, so much of it goes to our brain. So we want to be cognizant of what we're putting in our bodies, the sleep that we're getting, all of this is going to help. Another way that's pretty interesting to improve your myelin sheathing, which will then make you more open to these unlocks because your brain has more of the resources to build these new pathways, is actually movement. Steady state cardio. We learn better with movement and exercise. Now, interesting, the research shows that weightlifting and body time under tension doesn't necessarily improve as much as the steady state cardio. So when you're learning new things and you are moving your body, and even, for example, going for a walk, right? Going for a walk and then come back and then try to learn something, the research shows that that will be a benefit to the learning. It will expedite the learning because, for whatever reason, how our bodies are designed, steady state cardio produces all of the ingredients that allow us to have this idea of our brains being able to learn and grow better, faster, in a more optimal way. This is encouraging. Okay, so movement makes a big difference. Getting rest is really helpful. So, to circle us back to the beginning of this conversation, when this woman said, Robyne, this unlock was so substantive. Unlocks are, again, essentially new branches, right? It's new branches, new way of seeing things. And the unlock that this woman shared with me, and I have permission to share it, was we were talking about some forms of anxiety. Now, anxiety is a wee bit of a tricky one because there's so many different iterations of anxiety. But in this particular case, this woman was experiencing what we call like free flow anxiety or free flowing, where it wasn't that she was anxious about one particular thing. She was just like generally anxious about everything. Like she just noticed she had all of this like moving energy that just, she felt very, a lot of worry. And one of the things that we talked about was this idea that this worry was partially because she was underestimating how strong she was. She was underestimating how big these situations were in relation to how she could respond to them. So, for example, she was working with a very difficult boss, and it was just so much anxiety around this work situation. And it wasn't, again, I just said to you, it's not one specific thing, but in this particular case, it was the work, it was the boss, and she was underestimating her control and her agency. And when we started to unpack that, I was like, okay, listen, you're skilled. You have talent. You have gifts. This isn't the only place where you can generate an income from. Like there are other places where you can make an income. This one person isn't your only way of being able to support your family. Like if you're willing to like bet on yourself and take a risk and work hard, there are other ways for you to be able to make a livelihood. Like and I again, I spent time with her and coaching her through this idea about why are you underestimating your skills? Like don't why are you writing yourself off? Like you have a decade of really fine-tuned skills that to somebody else you're going to be their missing puzzle piece. You're going to be that missing piece that when they get the opportunity to work with you, all of a sudden it's going to benefit them. And you're going to benefit by being in a place where your skills are valued and they're recognized. So, again, the anxiety was essentially lying to her to suggest that she wasn't well resourced or she wasn't well equipped. She was underestimating how much power she had. And I don't think this woman's alone, right? I think a lot of us, if we're not careful, if we don't cultivate good habits of mind, we can let those, 4,000 thoughts a day take the wheel. And my friends, we have to develop habits of mind that allow us to sure recognize those intrusive thoughts, recognize those patterns, but they don't get to tell us what we're going to do next. Remember, we're the thinker, we're not the thought. And again, if you imagine that we're having, estimating about 4,000 thoughts just pop in our head on any given day, we want to make sure that we are solid with how we're checking in with ourselves. that we're not just like waking up in the state of reactivity. And I can share with you just next week, we're going to be having a webinar. So I love working with people. And unfortunately, I can't work one on one with as many people as I would love to be able to. So instead, I run these webinars where it's like, hey, jump in a training session with me for 90 minutes. And we're going to figure out what your unlocks are. We're going to figure out what it is that's holding you back, what's hindering you, and what's helping you. And where do we get you a really great return on your investment when it comes to your well-being? And remember, when we think of stress wisely, your well-being, it's physical, but it's also emotional, intellectual, environmental, social, occupational, financial, even spiritual. So again, helping people see these opportunities for unlocks. And I love what it feels like to have those like aha moments, right? Just those moments where we have clarity, those moments where all of a sudden it's like, oh, now I see, right? Now I get it. So, anyway, understanding that all of our information goes into these schemas, these building blocks. Now, connections between them, these are those connections, or what we call neuroplasticity, which is just the highway between those pieces of knowledge, how our brain travels. The more of that fatty myelin substance we have, the smoother it will be. And again, we want to be careful that the smooth, easier path isn't the one that's negative and self destructive. We want to foster and cultivate those stronger path systems of positivity. And that is the neuroscience, I think, behind a lot of the ideas around manifestation, that we're opening up this ease and this fluidness of welcoming things in and seeing things differently and allowing our brain to find other ways of interpreting, understanding, making sense of our world. I shared a lot, I think, relatively quickly on a pretty complex topic, but I can tell you, I've run into students literally 15 years after I gave that lesson about schemas and Hunter and say, Robyne, I still remember that lesson you taught us about schemas and how information gets organized. And then when I tell them Hunter's, second year university, they can't believe it. And again, this is information that once we see things, and I believe it's Tamsin who says, like, you can't unsee things sometimes. And my invitation and my hope for you is look for those opportunities, for those unlocks. Look for those opportunities of growing your perspective. Because when the right piece of information lands at the right time, it can radically transform your experience. Just really quick in closing, I can tell you, as someone, for example, who has navigated stress, that's why I study stress, because I'm somebody who can catch a good dose of stress every now and then. I didn't realize how significant the relationship between stress and cortisol and weight loss was until I started to do the research for that chapter on Stress Wisely. And when I dived into the physiology and the biology behind what happens to our body when we are under stress and we're in that state of chronic distress, and at the same time, here I was trying to navigate my weight, and what I just remember having this moment when I was deep in this literature and realizing, man, I'm not broken. It's not that I haven't found the right diet yet. It's literally because my nervous system has a flip switch. It's literally the switch that says it's okay to release extra body weight. Because of how I was stress cycling, that switch was literally locked. You cannot lose body weight when your body is full of cortisol. Like, you just can't. Like, any attempt that you make is just going to put more cortisol in. And when you have cortisol in your bloodstream, your body will not release the weight. So when I got really serious about the one thing that I can do about my nutrition and my exercise as it relates to stress, I realized that the diet that I was doing, the HIIT training I was doing, the running that I was doing, all of that was actually making weight loss even more difficult. But when I found out that, wait, if I reset my nervous system, which I was able to do with consistent steady state cardio, and introduced a little bit of intermittent fasting, because that's something that worked for me, and nothing radical. Like, I mean, just a really generous window of nutrition and refueling, like 50 pounds. Like, pounds that I carried and lost and put on and lost and put on. The unlock for me was realizing I couldn't hate myself healthy. You can't hate yourself healthy. So knowing that, wow, my workouts, my diet routines, my practices were actually keeping me in that particular body size. And then all of a sudden learning about steady state cardio and learning how to organize my day and my nutrition feeding, it radically transformed a behavior and a state that I had tried unsuccessfully to manipulate for over 25 years. I remember going on my first diet in grade 7, and it took me to 44 to figure out what my unlock was. And that's why I am so excited about my webinar, because I want more people to be able to get the clarity to know what's your unlock that's going to open you up to your big, bright future, because you deserve to be well, even in an unwell world. Okay, my friends, I've gone over time there. I hope that was helpful. Take good care of you. If you want to learn more about my stress webinar or my stress lab, there's a spot for you. You are so welcome to join. If this session in April doesn't fit, jump in the one in June. We're going to keep this learning going. I love training people on how to figure out what your unlock is. And to that dear, lovely woman who shared with me her unlock around anxiety, I'm so happy for you. And I can't wait to help other people find even more unlocks. Take good care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.